Blacksonville Excellence is on deck today, selecting just 100 names from Jacksonville history to celebrate the centennial of Black History Month was no easy feat. Fortunately, the reporter who put it together had plenty of help. Here to tell us about it is Will Brown, reporter at Jacksonville Today. Good morning, Will.
Good morning, Ann. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here and for your project. We're also joined by a virtual force field of local historians who contributed to this project. Jerry Urso, historian, writer, and archival researcher. Jerry, thanks for being here.
You're very welcome.
Adonnica Toler, historian. Adonnica, so nice to have you back on the program.
Thank you for inviting me.
And Carol Alexander, executive director at the A.L. Lewis Museum in American Beach. Carol.
Hello. Glad to be back.
It's great to have you. So, Will, when and why did you decide to compile this list?
Over the holidays, I watched the American Revolution on PBS and all 12 hours of it. And the combination of watching that series and reading Charles Blow's book, The Devil You Know, and I thought, oh, wait, 2026 is the centennial of Negro History Week. I should do something. We should do something. And then mentioned it to my wife and some family members, and they're like, oh, you should come up with like 100 people. It's like, okay. And frankly, I might have bit off more than I can chew. And so we just started naming names and writing down like people who we thought would be a great addition. And the first name that came up was Dr. Johnnetta Cole, who will always be Dr. Cole to me. I'll never have a first name for her. And so we just started writing down names in A.L. Lewis and the Beach Lady, and we just started writing and going down. And then I was like, well, there's a lot more out there, and I don't know everything. And so let's listen to people who have done more, researched more, done more scholarship, and incorporate them into the project. And having just watched a Ken Burns documentary, I loved how he incorporated historians and people who really knew more than him into the production. So I was like, let's do that here on the local level. And that was how Mr. Urso, we sat for a couple hours in the Masonic Lodge, and then Dr. Toler's research, and then Carol Alexander and I, we spoke for about like 90 minutes one day last month, and she also talked me off the ledge. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know. And she was the one who provided great context about A.L. Lewis and the Beach Lady and Dr. Cole and
those are names I want to get to too and talk about. But I do want to talk about the centennial of this important event and this commemoration every year. Black History Month began as Negro History Week. It was started, Adonnica, by Carter G. Woodson. And this was, not just a person that wanted to celebrate Black history, but somebody that worked actively to counter the predominant narrative at the time, this sort of, supremacist, white supremacist history that was incorporated in a lot of textbooks. He wrote textbooks. He regarded education as kind of all important, and actually looked at the history of Black education. I think he called it this fugitive act that had always been an act of assertion of rights and also, place in history.
Yes. And, as a historian of himself, he knew, just like I know great African Americans, I know great people, that just growing up around them, but they're never celebrated. You don't see them on television. And so that was his perspective. It was like, I know that we're great. I know some good people that you don't know about. So let me start with what I know. And as he continued to research, it went deeper and deeper and deeper. And so it was a way of him taking back and embracing and owning his own legacy, which happens to be all our legacy. And so that's what led to the celebration of that week.
And Jerry, in terms of his perspective on the need to commemorate, to recognize important figures in Black history, it's a key time right now as we're seeing educational standards change, as we're seeing certain parts of Black history being removed from museums, from schools, from curricula. How does it figure for someone like yourself who does all of this archival research, spend so much of your life digging into the role that, local Black history has played, particularly in the region and the lives of the people here?
Well, Adonnica and I have been working for close to a decade, and his 100 list would probably be up closer to 1,000, and that's just from Jacksonville with no exaggeration. So there's this, I call it the Frederick Douglass syndrome. So when Black History Month comes along, you get Harriet Tubman, Thurgood Marshall, Frederick Douglass, and then in Jacksonville, everything is James Weldon Johnson. And the problem is, if you read James Weldon Johnson's book, he pays homage to all these other people. So when we start naming everything after singling people out, we lose a lot of that history in that same context.
So I'll ask you, I mean, this is a list of 100. You said it could easily be 1,000. How do you narrow it down?
You can't. So we had this discussion,
Yes, we did.
and I said, next year, when you do another 100, you can't use the same people again.
Nope.
And it's the only way to keep it going. You have to have a platform, and we can't just have Reconstruction and civil rights and not some of the modern people to give them their flowers when they're alive. So in doing this 100 that he did, I think he did a remarkable job. I just think if anybody was omitted, it doesn't mean that they were less important.
A lot of people on this list have passed, not everybody. And I want to talk to you, Will, about that balancing act. But Carol, I want to bring you into the conversation first because you run a museum that is focused on the history of American Beach. And there are actually 3 people on this list that are connected to the work that you do, American Beach and its history. And I want to start just by talking about Abraham Lincoln Lewis. A.L. Lewis, tell us, first of all, who he was and why he's on this list, why he belongs on this list.
First of all, he's a Jacksonvillian. He's the Florida first African-American millionaire. So I mentioned that first because his history didn't start with American Beach. You know, he came from Madison, Florida to Jacksonville because that was the place to be. That was the place that people right out of slavery, you know, we saw Jacksonville as the New York of the South. Well, New York wasn't even as high at that point, but that was a history that was founded in the time when everything was going on. You know, he was born in 1865.
His parents were born into slavery.
Yeah, and they were in the western part of Florida and moved from Madison to here. So, you know, he brought history with him and met history here. So, you know, it's like not that history began during that time, but we were fighting in the South here. We had a enslavement population here, plus we had the troops here, and they remained. So history was kind of settled here. Not that it was not settled somewhere else, but he was in the mix of that. 1865, his name was Abraham Lincoln Lewis. Why do you think his mother and father named him? And a name depicts in African culture what you will be. Leadership.
It's interesting that you talk about him making history because he certainly made history, but he also made history in the sense that 2 of his great-grandchildren are on this list, Dr. Johnnetta Cole, who Will mentioned, and Maureen Betch, also known as the Beach Lady.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us, first of all, these women are in and of themselves extraordinary individuals. Tell us, and their sisters. Tell us a little bit about the Beach Lady, first of all, Maureen.
Maureen Betch is the queen. What you can say is Maureen is that queen that just became and is everything and everybody. Her spirit still lives. Born here, of course. Early on, education, both her sister and she were sent out of Jacksonville when they were like 16 years old to get more education in what was called the heartbed of education. For Black folk, Johnnetta went to Fisk. Maureen went to Oberlin. But she was always, as her sister described her, something that the family never really understood. She had music, she had brains, she had charisma, she had dance. And they said, okay, Maureen, go on up to Oberlin.
She was an opera singer.
Yeah, but not until she got to Oberlin.
Okay.
She had music. Her mother was the organist of what's the church?
Mount
Mount
Olive?
Olive. So there was music in the family. Johnnetta played violin. Maureen played the piano. So Oberlin had a great music department. But when she got there, she heard opera and said, "This is my dream." So she graduated in 55, and Roland Hayes took her by the hand to his house in Boston. And then they went to Europe, and she would hear many places. And that's where she first got her first break in France and then into Germany.
And so many people here know her for her environmental activism. I mean, she was known as the beach lady because she really did live in and on the beach in American Beach. She helped fight for American beach history. She helped fight for the environment and to preserve that area of the beach from being encroached on and developed. But she had this extraordinary, enormous kind of hair in its natural form that she carried on her hand. And she was known for, I mean, she called everybody baby. She was just a really delightful, spirit, and identified. She had a right whale named after her. I mean, she was just so Johnnetta Cole, though, her sister, Dr. Cole, also an amazing person. Tell us a little bit about her.
Well, let me go back to A.L. Lewis. Think about that line of who they were and why. That leader that he was, and then he had children that followed behind him and great grandchildren, which is Johnnetta Cole. I think I would like you to go to someone else. I'm getting
Your
ready
throat
now.
is all right. Well, we will, because her line that she that those women descend from, that A.L. Lewis descends from, Dr. Colwell traces it all the way back to a woman who's sometimes known as Anna Kingsley, but whose name is Anna Majignan
Anna Majignan Jai.
Jai. Anna Majignan Jai. Tell us about her, because she's on the list, number 98, in the culture and uplift category.
Yes. So she was someone who was born in Africa and brought here and enslaved. And her enslaver was a full adult, and she was a teenager when she was brought here. And
13.
Yes. I couldn't remember the specific age, but her enslaver brought her here and took her as a wife. And then once he died, she took over the property. And so she took over the property, which was in what is now the Kingsley Plantation over in that area. And then she had children with her enslaver. And so they moved to Haiti. And so she was just someone who, yes, she owned people, but she also released a series of people. And so Duval County had one of the few free black populations prior to 1860 because of the number of people that Anna Kingsley emancipated during her lifetime.
Extraordinary. Jerry, you're nodding along.
Yeah.
Let me add this about A.L. Lewis. The genius of A.L. Lewis was cooperation, collaboration, and cross-pollination. When you think about Afro Mutual Life Insurance Company, how by day they were competitors, and by night they were building universities and churches. So you got Mary McLeod Bethune as part of Citizens Life Insurance Company. You have Dr. Norton that owns Central Life Insurance Company. You have Captain Floyd, who needs his own program, who had People's Life Insurance Company. You have George W. Powell that had North Carolina Mutual. They were all on the founders of the Negro Business League in Florida. And so they're competitors, but if you look at the board of directors for America Beach or the Lincoln Golf Club, you see all those names together. Then outside of the business world in the church, Eartha White is Bethel Baptist. A.L. Lewis is an AME. And you see so much cross-pollination through different denominations for Abraham Lincoln's birthday, for the Committee for Emancipation Day programs, when they started the Jacksonville, the Negro Welfare League, which led to the Jacksonville Urban League. Look at the board of directors, Cargill Alexander, Dr. Thomas H.B. Walker. all these people from all these different denominations, competitors in the business world, are part of the Niagara movement. They're part of the Negro Business League. They're part of all these celebrations. They understood. And one of the things, George, if I just one more sentence. So George Powell is actually 21 years old when he's on a speaking tour with Booker T. Washington. And one of the most important things he talked about is Black businesses doing good and honest business to keep money in the community and getting people to invest. He literally said a nickel at a time. And some of these people bought war bonds in World War I and did very well after the war because they bought war bonds. They were encouraging people to buy war bonds. So all these different people, they say people don't get along. They talk about crabs in a bucket. I say malarkey. It's the honest truth. There was a sense of responsibility that came with success.
You know who spoke about that earlier this week? Bishop Rudolph McKissick Sr. During a church service at the Bethel Church, they brought Bishop Sr. out to speak for about 15, 20 minutes about local Black history and the things that he's seen.
Wow.
And Bishop McKissick is closer to 100 than 95. We're
98.
He's 99.
I was not about to put numbers out there.
No, he's 99 in October.
He said he'll be 100
next October.
I was not putting a number on
Anyway,
it. I'm from
he's
the
up
South.
there.
His centennial is coming up.
It's coming
up.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. But I say that to say that he gave this example of how he was the child of a tailor and how growing up in the 20s and 30s in La Villa, so there was so much collaboration and community, and that was the way people moved forward by, like Jerry said, there might be like, I guess like competitiveness, but a friendly competitiveness. A great way to kind of explain it is kind of like the Florida A&M Bethune-Cookman rivalry.
Mm-hmm.
Florida A&M graduates and Bethune-Cookman graduates always want to beat each other when competing on the field, but you'll almost never hear a Bethune-Cookman graduate talk cross-eyed about a Florida A&M graduate among other people, and the same ways vice versa. And so there's this friendly, I want to be better than you, but we're pushing each other forward. And Bishop McKissick was mentioning that, and there's so many people. Some of the people who are living on this list are people who are doing that every single day.
Adonnica, I want to ask you, because you are also the director of the Eartha M. White Museum and Gardens. Talk a little bit about her legacy here in Jacksonville. I mean, she was a philanthropist, but she was also a real activist and worked very hard on difficult issues at the time, including pushing back on, very real dangers for people of color in this city.
Yeah. So Dr. Eartha M. White is, to this day, we are still just amazed at her activism, her involvement, her ability to bring all classes, races together. When Dr. White saw an issue, she addressed it at that moment. Now, she might ask me if I want to join her, and I might say no, but it doesn't matter because she's going to go help Will. Like, Will needs this, and I'm going to make it happen. Will experienced this situation is not right, so I'm going to address the issue. And so, if you think about a woman who was barely 5 feet tall in the South, so she's Black, so all what society says is negative about her, she disregarded that to the day that we're still talking about her. Her legacy, there's so much that is happening in this city, not just that she helped the poor and the Black community, but there's things civically that you wouldn't even imagine. She was behind it, part of establishing United Way, part of establishing Jacksonville Historical Society. In 1929, segregation is a part of life, but she was able to cross those lines and start these organizations. And she addressed them. She would collaborate, and she had a way of going into the white community and finding that white person that she could talk to that would work with her. And she stayed behind the scenes, which is amazing because, and that's why we're finding out so much about her, is that Will could be standing up there saying this is so, but she's behind the scenes talking to Caroline. See now what I need you to do, because Carol is the one that has what he needs to make this part of it happen. And so with Jerry's talking about the collaboration, Eartha White was the master, and so she was running the political campaign for Republican presidents at the time. When a woman is supposed to be in the kitchen and cooking, Eartha White has businesses. She has a taxi service. She has a department store. She has a laundry service with 3 delivery trucks. And the phrase, put your duds in our suds, we watch everything but a dirty conscience, while she's feeding people in the community, while she's teaching at Stanton, while she's secretary of the Afro-American Life Insurance Company, and on and on and on. And it just does, like, how did she manage to do that?
Well, and the hostility at the time, I mean, she is actually pushing for anti-lynching legislation.
Absolutely.
So
She is, yes.
it kind of puts you in a frame of
She
mind
was, yes.
of exactly what the legal and
yes, and what it could happen to her because
Mhm.
she did it, but she didn't care. And she was one of the major advocates of the anti-lynching bill in 1923.
Sure.
So, I as soon as you mentioned Eartha White, I thought of 2 things. One of which is this project is possible because I was humble enough to listen to Black women, and that is the only reason why this project is off the ground. Is because so many times throughout history, Black women were either ignored or not given their flowers while they were able to smell them, and that was one of the things. I'm like, okay, we're going to consult Black women and listen to Black women and make sure Black women are very much included as part of this project, and not just words about them, but photos about them. And then the second thing that I think about when it comes to lynching is one of the people on this list. He has it seems like a tangential connection to Jacksonville, Harry Moore.
Yes.
And I am from Brevard County, Florida, and so I remember seeing a sign for the Harry Moore Courthouse, and I remember asking my dad one time. It's like, well, who? It was a child. It's like, well, who was that? And he says, oh, well, your aunt knew him. Say again, what?
Well, for
Yeah.
people who don't know who Harry T.
Yes,
Moore
yes,
is, I mean, he's on the list, and he is, an extraordinary figure. He and his wife both, for the work that they did to advance voting rights, to fight racial discrimination, to fight for equal pay for people doing the same jobs. They were murdered on
Yes,
Christmas.
yes. Christmas 1951 in Brevard County, and they were teachers and
By the Klan.
yes. And the reason why I wanted to bring up Harry Moore in this conversation is because sometimes we act like these things are a lifetime ago. Well, Harry Moore was an elementary school teacher in Cocoa, Florida in the 30s. My father was at that same school. I didn't find out until publishing this project that my aunt used to go to his house a couple of times. She was hanging out with one of her uncles, and it's like, oh yeah, we'd go up there we'd go up to Mims on NAACP business.
Didn't you also find another family connection with Zora Neale Hurston during this project?
Yes, like after publication, shared the series with my family, and then my aunt, who's also in her 90s, so we're not saying numbers, but I think my sister was like,
I'm just
"Hey,"
going to say, once you're in your 90s, I think you can claim it, right?
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think
you
you
have to
should,
stop.
and I
It's
think you
just-
should.
yeah.
They
because
can, I
it's
won't,
It's
but-
a testimony.
but there was like my sister mentioned, hey, Aunt Mary, didn't you know Zora Neale Hurston? And I didn't realize, and so my aunt texts us and says, oh yeah, I knew her. I knew her all the time, and she'd talk about her life and her adventures, and I didn't think they were real until I went to college and listened in a Black history class. And I was like,
It's
I'm sorry.
amazing stuff.
Say that
Yeah,
again.
Yeah.
I just want to say that we got a message from Latrice on Facebook saying the compilation that Will and Jacksonville Today provided was quite impressive. It was truly educational to read about so many African Americans who had a firsthand part in cultivating the city that we all love. To see so many of the schools that they came from or helped build was just phenomenal. Well done, Rattler. I'm guessing we got an A&M fan there.
Okay.
Sure.
So Adonnica and I had back in 18 and 19 did a lot of research.
Yes,
and
you
what we
did.
came across was some of the NAACP proceedings. So Eartha White being barely 5 foot tall, the Ku Klux Klan are parading through Jacksonville. one of the AP reporters' camera was smashed by the police, and he was actually incarcerated, so he couldn't report on the 1920 presidential election.
I think somebody's got a phone going off.
And
We're going to want to silence there.
look,
and so
hotline.
she's writing down names of people that are being disenfranchised. Simultaneously in Miami, the Ku Klux Klan are running and threatening people that vote. The same day, July Perry goes to vote in Ocoee, Florida, where he was where Moses Norman was chased to his house, and July Perry defended himself and led to the largest political bloodbath massacre in American history at the
1920.
Ocoee massacre. After that, it's James Weldon Johnson, who is he's the head of the NAACP. You have Captain Floyd, Bishop Hurst, and Blanche Armwood go to St. Augustine, Florida, to meet with President-elect Warren G. Harding, promoting the Dyer Bill, which was the anti-lynching legislation, which wasn't passed till 100 years later when it was renamed the Emmett Till Bill. But
I mean, those kinds of connections are really only discoverable when you're digging into that level of history, Jerry, and you're kind of getting into the records to show how these people were coordinating, how they were, managing to elevate issues that might not have otherwise gotten the attention. I mean, to your point, those rallies are happening specifically to disenfranchise and scare people from voting.
Right.
Hundreds and hundreds of Klansmen marching through the streets to prevent the work that Eartha White is doing.
Right.
and it was two women
and
that
women that were in Eartha going around and finding you to getting your name and then telling you to get back in line and don't get out of that line until you vote. And so the determination, knowing what that means for her life, that this is more important than whether or not she survived it or not.
Eartha White and both her legacy, let's not forget, she saved the Afro-American Industrial and Benefit Association. It was formed in 1901. She was there. It was 5 men talking about collaboration that came to Bethel Baptist Church, talking about our centennial coming up, Bishop Rudolph McKissick Sr. They came there. They were not all Baptists.
Right.
And they decided to create this organization to help the city because this is right past yellow fever. And everybody left. And La Villa had come into Jacksonville. They put council people there. Even the mayor left. And people died. A lot of folk died.
Sure.
So 30 years later or so, when things were getting back together, the black folk here were disenfranchised, almost like when we had COVID. But these men came together, pulled money, all $100, established Afro-American. We really were not considered Afro-American in 1901. And they formed this company, first insurance company of Florida, had a little office, and 5 months later, this office was really doing well. Black folks knew about insurance after yellow fever, deaths that were happening in health. They had no money. And then this office burns down. We know the fire of Jacksonville. And Eartha White ran against the fire. She had become the first bookkeeper of all of the men. She was the only woman. She ran against the fire to the little office and took all of the files, saved that 5-month-old office, ran to the east side where A.L. Lewis was living, and he and she kept this company together. And her story, as Adonnica was entwining around history, she was that one that saved that building. She was the one that helped to keep it up. And she was the daughter of Clara, who came out of the Harrison plantation on Amelia Island, who talked to them about Franklintown. That's how the company was going there. That's how A.L.
And Franklintown is right next to American Beach.
That's how A.L. Lewis found American Beach.
Really?
By going to Franklintown, our beaches were all segregated. Again, Eartha White is there. Again, Clara White was born on the Harrison plantation where she got her child, Eartha. So Eartha White is
like the thread that weaves through everything.
You all started talking about, her work in the 20s, but she was a kid
It's-
doing it
yeah.
in the 1901.
I
Listen
want
to
to
black women.
I
That's
want
right.
to ask about Bethel because you have all of these categories, Will, trailblazers, you've got education figures, the judiciary, politics, sports, business, civil rights, arts and literature, culture and uplift. You have a category just for Bethel. And I want to ask you about that, kind of why it manifests, how it merits that, its history was also in being split from a white church. Its creation was because of a racist and segregated society. So how does Bethel figure in as kind of its own category?
Well, so many of the people on this list are attended Bethel at one point in their life, like Eartha White, like Zora Neale Hurston briefly, Douglas Anderson, William Raines. For crying out loud, this past Sunday I saw Kareem Brown and Joyce Morgan and Judge Drayton were all there this Sunday alongside myself. So there are about 12 to 15 people who are members of this of the church, but the church founded in 1838, and post the Civil War, when black churches were allowed to be a thing, because during prior to the Civil War there weren't really black churches like that in the South. The congregation kind of split because the white people in the congregation wanted their own denomination, or they wanted their own church, and they wanted the name, but they were outnumbered, I think 4-1. I think it was like 240 black folks, 60 white folks. And so because there were more black folks, a judge actually said, no, you have the name, you have the congregation.
So
You can
the
keep the
black
property.
church got to keep the name. Am I correct in thinking that the
Correct.
white church
So-
was First Baptist? Is that
Yes.
what split
Exactly.
off?
No,
Okay.
so yeah, Bethel was the first Baptist church in the city of Jacksonville, founded by 4 enslavers and 2 enslaved, which is amazing that the 2 enslaved get credit for finding the church in 1838.
I'm impressed.
And yeah, that's so the church has always been radical. And I have to say, I am the ministry leader of the History and Archive Ministry. So I can, I've been doing much deeper work. And what we can say about, and the split happened because when the Union came down, they took over the church and made it a hospital. When the war was over, in the split, well, the white members didn't want to be members with the black members, and the courts gave the church to the black members. And so another thing connected is the first 6 deacons of the new Bethel Church included the father of James Weldon Johnson and John Rosamond Johnson.
I did
Which
not
people do
know
not
that
know that.
until
And
Who-
it's
who wrote
James
Lift Every-
William Johnson, James William Johnson Sr., which means James Weldon is not his real name. He changed it because when he got older, people started calling him Jim Willie. He did not like that. But their father was one of the first deacons, and he had a ministry that he got put. Remember, they lived in La Villa, and Jacksonville's a different place. And he had a ministry that looked after the people in the red light district.
So talk about biting off more than you can chew, Will. This segment, boy, we could talk about this forever, and I am going to have to wrap it. This is just an extraordinary bunch of people. I'd like to download your brains. But Will, this is a great project. It's called Blacksonville 100. It is a list of iconic leaders, trailblazers, everyone at the forefront of Black history here in Jacksonville, and you can find it at jacksonvilletoday.org. Thank you. Will Brown, Jerry Urso, Adonnica Toler, Carol Alexander, thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.